Yo, what's going on, guys? So I just got off of Bleacher Report, and I want to share with you guys the stream that I had. I thought it was pretty informative, so I want to share it on the channel. But real quick, want to give a shout out to BetUS, guys. They're doing a huge contest right now. They're basically giving out 2 Super Bowl tickets. Okay, now here's how to enter. Place a bet on any NFL line out there, and share your bet slip basically on Twitter. Tag the BetUS official account and tag a friend that you're going to take with you. Use the hashtag BetUSLVIII. And just to let you know, the contest will end on the 25th of January, with the winner being announced on the 26th. So big time giveaway going on. Definitely enter that contest. Maybe you guys will find yourself in the Super Bowl and you guys can rep some Jaguars gear, because we know the Jaguars won't be there, but at least you guys can represent. So yeah, big shout out to BetUS for this contest that they are doing right now. Definitely want to spread the word on that. And with all that said, let's go into this Bleacher Report live stream. And what is going on, everybody? Welcome into the Bleacher Report app. It is January 8th, 2024. And we are in a state of misery as Jags fans. Look, the Jaguars played their final game of the regular season yesterday against the Tennessee Titans. I was planning about 24 hours ago to be recapping that game and talking about how we're going to prepare for a home matchup against the Browns after going back-to-back in AFC South titles. But that is not the case. The Jaguars had a complete meltdown to win the season, and we're not even really going to recap too much of the game, because let's be real, the season's over. Like, from now, it's the game is not going to be viewed as a solo game. It's going to be really viewed as the whole entire season, because the season is done. Now we're going to spew off takes about what's going to happen going forward. And look, the Jaguars started off the season 8-3. The Jaguars got a huge win in Houston against the Texans. And for about 3 hours there, the Jaguars were actually the number 1 seed in the AFC. The number 1 seed. And after that moment, the Jags finished the season 1-5 in the 6 games after that, and ended the season with a 9-8 record. And 9-8 in the AFC is not good enough to get you into the playoffs. So the Jaguars had a complete meltdown to end the year. All the Jaguars had to do after starting off 8-3 was go 2-4 the rest of the way. They couldn't do it. They went 1-5, the only win coming against the worst team in the NFL in the Carolina Panthers. And look, Jaguars finished this year with a winning record, and it is the most hollow winning season of all times. And Jaguar fans have suffered a lot of pain. Look, most of the time, though, the pain comes in the form of like 4-12 seasons. We've done the 5-11. Heck, we've gone 1-15 before. However, this was a different one. You know what I mean? Like I said, we're used to double-digit losing seasons. We're used to blowout losses against our different division rivals, and we're even used to playoff losses. But look, the Jaguars this year, like I said, start off 8-3. We were celebrating at the end of November. We were sharpening ourselves in for the playoffs. The question was not, will the Jags get into the playoffs? The question was, what seed will the Jaguars be when they get into the playoffs? They had a commanding lead in the AFC South after defeating the Houston Texans. They were 4-1 against the AFC South, just kind of running through the division. And, they had a few tough games against the AFC North coming up, then against the NFC South, and you're going to close it out against the worst team in your division and the Tennessee Titans, and the Jaguars could not get it done. And it's crazy. It's crazy. And there's some people out there saying, okay, well, it's a winning season. Not all is lost. But like I said, the most hollow winning season the Jaguars could ever have. A winning season that doesn't get you in the playoffs. A winning season that gets you in no man's land in the NFL draft. I believe the Jaguars are drafting number 17 right now. And right now we are left with so many more questions than answers. And for this loss, look, everybody needs to be held accountable for this. From ownership to the GM, to the head coach, to the coordinators, position coaches, down to the players, everybody needs some part of this loss. And really, I put pretty much most of the blame on the GM for constructing this roster the way it is. Look, this whole entire offseason, Jaguar fans are begging for Trent Baalke to sign another pass rusher, do something there, bolster up the offensive line. But what was Trent Baalke's offseason moves? It was basically to do nothing. Look, his biggest offseason move came in October of 2022 when they traded for Calvin Ridley. And I tipped my cap to him. That was a pretty good move. But outside that, they said, look what we did last year. The Jaguars were really good down the stretch. I believe the Jaguars started 2-6, then won a bunch of games to end the season to get into the AFC playoffs through the AFC South title. And they even won a playoff game against the Chargers, and they went, strike for strike with the MVP, Patrick Mahomes, with this eventual Super Bowl winner, Kansas City Chiefs. And they said, look, we did all that with the core that's intact. We can take basically this whole entire group, run it back, improve a little bit through the draft, and the Jaguars should be good to go. That plan did not work out at all. And when you look at it, one of the worst offensive lines in the NFL, and most specifically, you had center Luke Fortner that I can't remember the Jaguars ever having as bad of a center as Luke Fortner. I mean, if you just go back, if you want to see any play this year that is a microcosm of Luke Fortner's year, it was that QB sneak on 4th and 1 where Trevor Lawrence tried to do the Superman or the dunk, whatever you want to call it, and Luke Fortner got pushed 5 yards back. All he has to do is push the guy in front of him, and that's a touchdown. And who knows? You got to get the 2-point conversion, but it's a different game. You're not turning it over on the 1 yard line. Just an awful, awful player. And on the defensive line, and I guess going back to Luke Fortner, and I think that made basically the guards play worse than what they really were, because Brandon Sheriff had a tough year, and whoever was in at left guard, whether it be, I think the Jaguars had 4 different left guards in there this year, from starting Ben Barch to him getting cut, and then he had a rotation of Walker Little, Ezra Cleveland, Tyler Shatley got some play there. Bunch of left guards this year. It wasn't a good scene, and I think having a bad center made all those guys even worse than they were. And then we go to the defensive line, and look, Josh Allen, career year, broke the Jaguars' franchise record in sacks in a single season. So he had a tremendous year. He was on a contract year, so he's going to get paid handsomely by the Jaguars if things go right. And Trayvon Walker, look, he progressed in the second year, and he got double-digit sacks. But a lot of us weren't saying we need another edge rusher because we didn't believe in Josh Allen or Trayvon Walker. We said we needed an extra one because we had nobody behind Josh Allen and Trayvon Walker. And I believe we only had 3 sacks from any other outside linebacker outside of those guys. It was awful. And if you want to be a good contending team, you need a third edge rusher these days. You need a guy that comes in on third down, kind of like what Arden Key was to the Jaguars last year. That extra piece that's a spark that you bring in on third down and, can get some havoc on a quarterback. The Jaguars, lucky for Trent Baalke and, Doug Peterson, that Josh Allen and Trayvon Walker stayed relatively healthy throughout the year, because, man, if either one of them went down, we would have been toast. I mean, I don't know. The defensive line would have looked so bad. So they were lucky that those guys stayed healthy, but the fact that you didn't bring in another edge rusher stunk. And, I talked about the Calvin Ridley trade earlier. A lot of us in October of 2022 were really commending that trade, saying, look, excellent move. But then when you look back on it, what did that trade do? It basically made the Jaguars hold their 2nd, 3rd, and 4th round picks in escrow, to where they couldn't make any moves at a trade deadline. The Jaguars wanted the Josh Uche, but they weren't able to give up the draft capital for him because they didn't have that 3rd round pick. If you want to make a swing for a Chase Young or a Montez Sweat, the Jaguars couldn't do it because their 2nd round picks were held in escrow. So as much as we commended that trade back then, when you look back at it a little bit further up, it wasn't very good. It wasn't very good, unfortunately. So yeah, the GM just outside of that, just the team in general wasn't good. I mean, I'm not going to get too much into the roster construction, but the main thing is that offensive line and defensive line. I mean, the offensive line got your quarterback suffering like 4 different injuries, and your defensive line could never get pressure when it really mattered. And look, the head coach, Also, Doug Peterson, I love Doug Peterson. We are lucky to have a Super Bowl winning head coach, but look, he was responsible for this team going 1-5 down the stretch and basically giving up. I mean, players a lot of times looked uninterested. I mean, Rayshawn Jenkins is out here like not wanting to hit players. We have guys on defense not making their first tackles. We have all these like miscommunications with the quarterback and the wide receiver. I mean, I'm watching the game yesterday, and did you guys hear how many times the announcer, I believe his name was Trent Green, was like, "Oh, like miscommunication between Trevor Lawrence and the wide receiver, miscommunication there." It's like, why are there so many miscommunications? You're an offensive head coach. You have a lot of this, game planning going on. And if it's the offensive coordinator's fault, then you got to do something to help out the offensive coordinator, because maybe he's in over his head. It's incredible. And just this game, all the Jaguars had to delay a game, and they had to burn a timeout in the second half because of the clock winding down. And look, Jaguars needed an extra timeout because the Titans rolled down the clock. It's crazy, man. It's crazy. And like I said, the players just looked super unmotivated down the stretch. I mean, I even remember the Jaguars were down 8 points at halftime, and Tennessee Titans were getting the ball. And I said, look, it's time for the defense to set the tone in this half. 3-and-out the Titans, or at least get them off the field, force a punt, and then let the offense get the ball back and let them drive down the field. What did the Jaguars do? They allowed Derrick Henry to get like an 80-something yard run and get down to the 4-yard line, and then they eventually scored a touchdown. So you were down 15. Luckily, the offense did kind of march back. We were about a half a yard away from tying the ball game or potentially tying it. They would have been down 2, pending a 2-point conversion, but it's rough. It's rough. 2023 was a complete failure, and it turned into a complete train wreck. 2022 was all about house money. They won the AFC South. They won a playoff game. They said, look, we were early in this process. We weren't supposed to be here. Imagine next year when we add on to this roster and we get better. No, in the NFL, if you're not getting better, then you're probably getting worse. And the Jaguars, honestly, probably should have taken a page from the 2018 Jacksonville Jaguars, where that team lost, or that team went to the AFC Championship game in 2017. And what did they do in 2018? They didn't really do anything to get better. They ran the whole entire team back. And maybe the season wasn't as I guess the season appeared more disastrous because the Jaguars, I believe, went 5-11 that year. But same result, no playoff appearances. Only thing you get is a worse draft pick this year. It's crazy, man. And we haven't had a discussion about Trevor Lawrence. And look, I do believe in Trevor Lawrence. And there were a lot of things going against him. Look, the Jaguars had no run game all year. The wide receivers, like I said earlier, constantly on different pages than Trevor Lawrence. The offensive line really didn't give Trevor Lawrence much time to sit back there and sling the rock. The offensive scheme, I thought, sucked. And look, he had like 4 different injuries this year. But at the end of the game, at the game-winning drive or potential game-winning drive, Trevor Lawrence had a wide-open Calvin Ridley and missed that throw. Okay, fine. 3rd and 2 after that. 2 straight incompletions of bad throws. You turn it over on downs. The last drive of the season, you couldn't even get a first down. And if Trevor Lawrence hits Calvin Ridley, it's a touchdown. I mean, he had nobody in front of him. He beat the safety. He would have walked into the end zone. Trevor Lawrence didn't make it happen. And look, we can we can make all the excuses for Trevor Lawrence. And look, I make excuses for him too. But at the end of the day, in a nutshell, when you look at the season in a vacuum, Trevor Lawrence, for one reason or another, regressed. We were hoping that he would build off the momentum at the end of 2022, and it was going to spring into a crazy, crazy year for Trevor Lawrence, where he's going to be in MVP conversations, and he regressed. And the stats weren't great. He was winning some games for a time, but I think a lot of those games were because of the defense. And the offense at no point this year looked elite. Maybe we had a good game here or there. The first time they played the Titans in Jacksonville, Trevor Lawrence had like 4 touchdowns. There were different games this year where it's like, oh, look, we see what the offense can be. But at the end of the day, the run game always sucked. The offensive line was never good. The wide receivers, we lost Christian Kirk and we went 1-5 after that. Zay Jones was not the same player as last year. Calvin Ridley, if I were to give a game ball to anybody this game against the Titans, it would be Calvin Ridley because I did think that he showed up, but there was a lot of bad, and the offense at no point was good, and changes need to be made. Press Taylor probably needs to be gone. It's crazy how much nobody really talks about it, but Jim Bob Cooter was a Jags passing game coordinator in 2022. They lose him. You don't really think much about it, but man, this pass game was non-existent this year, and it's an absolute shame. It's an absolute shame. And look, as much as we would like to hate on Trevor Lawrence and assign blame to him, he is safe. He's one of the only guys right now that is safe in the Jaguars organization. And I've been a Jaguar fan long enough to see bad quarterback play and to see when a guy isn't it. I do see that Trevor Lawrence has all the tools to be great. He just did not have a good year this year. And the Jaguars need to do everything they can to build a good roster around him to make sure that, hey, if Trevor Lawrence fails, it's not because the roster sucks. It's because he's not good. They need to get to that point. They need to build a run game. They need to start using their day 2 draft picks wisely. And look, will changes happen? They should happen, but I'll be 100% honest with you. I don't see a whole lot of wholesale changes happening. That's just not Shad Khan's MO. Shad Khan has cleaned house once, and it was after the 2012 season. It's been 10 years since he's ever gotten rid of a head coach GM duo. And I'm not a guy that I don't think Doug Peterson should go. I've seen Doug Peterson, lead the Jaguars to 2 winning records. I've seen what Jaguars football was like before Doug Peterson. But I 100% believe that Trent Baalke should be gone. I mean, if I were to have any defense of Press Taylor, what is Press Taylor supposed to do without a run game? What is he supposed to do, with some of the personnel? Now, I do put a lot of the communication blames on him. Like there should be no instance where quarterback and wide receivers are on different pages so often. So GM should absolutely go, but I don't think Shad Khan does it. I almost think that they'll fire an offensive line coach and a defensive back coach, and they're just going to run it back and hope things change. That's just my feeling on things. But if I were running things, I would get rid of the head coach, or not head coach. I would get rid of the GM Trent Baalke, and I would get rid of Press Taylor. Look, Press Taylor was the reason why Doug Peterson was fired or let go or whatever happened with his tenure in Philadelphia. He wanted Press Taylor to be the offensive coordinator. GM Howie Roseman and the owner of the Philadelphia Eagles said no. And Doug said, you know what? I'm out. If I can't build my own coaching staff, I'm out. At some point, he needs to look out for himself and say, look, Press Taylor, I love the guy, but changes need to be made. And unfortunately, the offensive scheme sucked, and he needs to cut ties. He needs to cut ties. There's so many things the Jaguars didn't do. We didn't start running with a fullback later on in the year. I thought we should have done that more. The Jaguars rarely ever attack the middle of the field. And at the end of the day, you have a quarterback that came into the Jaguars labeled a generational talent, and he was far from generational this year. Unfortunately, far from generational this year. And that sucks to see. So, yeah, the entire football operation should be absolutely embarrassed and ashamed of themselves for what happened this year and the complete meltdown that happened. Losing to the Tennessee Titans, the worst team in your division, to lose the AFC South. Jaguars had an opportunity to go back-to-back AFC South titles, which they haven't won back-to-back division titles since like the late 90s. It's a shame. And that teams around the AFC South should only be getting better. We've seen how good CJ Stroud and the Houston Texans are doing. I imagine if you look at their draft, they're going to keep drafting, and they have a lot of money to spend. So do the Colts. The Colts have a young guy, Anthony Richardson, and a head coach in Shane Steichen, who, quite frankly, I thought got a lot more out of the roster than he should have this year, finishing 9-8. So, yeah, we're going to discuss offseason moves at a later time. The only thing I know right now is that Josh Allen should 100% be re-signed. Figure out a way to get him done, and then we'll work through the rest of the roster from there. And I think the pressing thing about this year is not only do you miss out on the playoffs, we know about all that, but this is an opportunity for the Jaguars to just try to change the DNA of this team. Try to change it. And how do you do that? You win. You win games. You win division titles. The Ravens have been so good the last 10, 15 years. Maybe they're bad a year or two here or there. You look at the 49ers since Shanahan brought in the building. They've been just consistently winning. You look at the Houston Texans. They're not this great organization or anything, but they've been able to win a lot of division titles. And I don't know. You see it all over the place. And Jaguars right now, even the Seattle Seahawks have it. The Jaguars right now they have a good year, and then the next year they flop. That's been the story. I'm a 30-year-old dude. That's been the story my whole entire life. I was born in 93. Older people will talk to you about the 90s. I didn't live through that. I really started paying attention to the Jaguars a lot maybe in 2004, 2005, 2006. Back then Peyton Manning was running the AFC South, and just the Jaguars of my lifetime, we've had a year here or there that's good, but they never followed up with a good year. And I was hoping that now with the Jaguars having, the Super Bowl winning head coach in Doug Peterson, the franchise quarterback in Trevor Lawrence, I was hoping that would spark changes. And unfortunately, it didn't. So with all that said, thank you guys for listening to my rant.